Show.
My name is Bob Potzner, and have I got a fun show for you today. But before I get into this show, I have to mention that right before I got on here today being March 12, 2026, I got the horrible news of a gun situation in Michigan. A synagogue was attacked by someone who drove a car into the synagogue. Luckily, it was a half day of school, as I understand it, so there were not children there at that point in time, and only one security guard was hurt, although the shooter or the person with the gun who invaded the school was murdered from what we understand. I know very little about the facts. I'm raising it only because, ironically, I did a show yesterday with Veronica Reich, an American citizen who lives in Israel and the United States. We talked about the war, et cetera, et cetera. And today we have an example. We don't know whether today's situation was related to what's going on in Iran now, but it's again an example of anti-Semitism. And we've got to stop all the antis in America today. I'll mention more about this in a later show because I want to get to the show I have today planned with 4 terrific local poets. I am someone who knows very little about poetry. Some people are afraid of math, some people are afraid of English. I'm afraid of poetry. And when I was a freshman at Yale, my first class in English, we had to talk about poetry. And I would be reading the poem and say, gee whiz, I don't understand this. What can I do about this, you know? But I have had a couple shows. I had a show recently with Ira Jo Fisher, who's a poet from Richfield. And I have a show today with 4 excellent poets, some of whom are poet laureates of local towns. I'm going to have them introduce themselves and tell you who they are and what they do, a little bit of it. We're going to get into some of the presentations they make, but I just want to get you to know them just a touch. So I'm going to start with Hannah Lipman, who is the lady in the black blouse. How are you today, Hannah?
I'm fine, Bob. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Tell us a little about yourself. It's nice seeing you.
Nice to see you too. I am, I've recently been appointed the Poet Laureate of Bethel, and I have a 3-year term that goes from January 1st to December 31st, 2028. I have also, I'm the managing editor of Bethel Grapevine, which is an online newspaper, and I'm the curator of Poetry Corner, where we publish monthly poets. Part of what I'm doing with, as Bethel Poet Laureate is working with the schools and having kids submit poetry, and we're gonna have also an ekphrastic piece of this and have the schools also, the kids use their art and poets, high school poets.
That sounds cool. We're going to get to that in more detail a little later on.
Yeah.
People ask me, why don't I do more shows about the law? I am a lawyer and I should know about law, which I do somewhat. I like to do shows that are things that I don't know much about. So I'm going to ask you questions that I may know the answers to or may not know the answers to, but because the audience may not know it. So please tell me, what is a poet laureate?
So a poet laureate is somebody that is enthusiastic about poetry and has found a connection to themselves through it, I believe, and also can bring it to the community. And also write poems for public events. I recently wrote a poem for the swearing in of the town officials in December 1st. They asked me to do that. It's somebody that cares about poetry and promotes it through the town.
And it's quite an honor. It's quite an honor.
I feel honored to be.
And we're going to get into more detail later on. Brian Clements, he's the only gentleman here, so except for me, of course. Brian, who are you?
Hey, Bob. I'm Brian Clements. I'm a professor of poetry at Western Connecticut State University. I've been there for, this is my 22nd year now. Came to WestCon to found the MFA program in creative and professional writing, and most recently I've been directing the honors program, the Cathrari honors program at Western. I published about 20 books. I say books, some of those books are online books, print and online books. Some of those are anthologies, some of those are volumes of my own works of poetry.
And Brian's been invited today, even though when Duke plays Carolina in basketball, he roots for Carolina.
I vote for whoever's playing Duke.
That's right, that's right. And you're on the show anyway, because I like your wife. Okay, next in front of Brian, that would be you.
That's me. Hi, I'm Barb Jennis. I'm the Poet Laureate Emerita, meaning past tense, of Ridgefield, Connecticut. I'm a retired English teacher who always put a lot of time and energy into teaching poetry to people who were suspicious of it, Bob.
Suspicious, good word.
Suspicious, there you go. Currently, now that I'm not any longer serving as Poet Laureate, I still do a lot of programming in Ridgefield and throughout the state of Connecticut. I still teach in local schools, go in for special poetry units. We'll talk more a little bit later about a couple of programs that I help spearhead. And I'm now also a grandmother, so that's...
Mazel tov. You know, the programs you all do, we're going to get to that a lot in this show, because you folks all take poetry and try to get out into the community.
Right.
Where'd you teach, by the way?
Scotts Ridge Middle School in Ridgefield.
When did you last teach there?
2017 was my last year.
And when was your first year?
In Ridgefield, it was 2003. I was at Brookfield before that.
That was my last year on the Board of Education in Ridgefield. I
Oh,
was
wow.
on the Ridgefield Board of Ed,
That's
1997.
right. That's right. I knew your name was familiar.
Well, that's good. That's from it's from, I think. Now, next, last but not least,
Hi,
you are?
I'm Cheryl Panosian, and I'm the Danbury Poet Laureate. And my term runs from May 2024 to May 2027. And you know, everyone else, I go into schools and do workshops in poetry. I have a bunch of programs kind of planned over the next few months. And I believe that bringing poetry to various community and locations really helps bring it to the forefront and really help people see how poetry is a part of life. It's not separate or something to be wary of. And I think for about 10 years I was teaching at Founders Hall in Ridgefield, the Senior Center, and really thoroughly enjoy teaching poetry.
I clearly have a great panel. In fact, I want to thank Brian for getting this panel together, because you folks are all very into your profession and your love of poetry. I'm going to get into the first topic, which we had a very lively prep meeting. I always have a prep meeting, as my audience knows, before every show, a few days before. And we had a very lively discussion about topics to be brought today. But one topic I want to bring up is, what is poetry? And Cheryl was kind enough, and everyone's sharing some poems with me, and there was discussion, should we have poetry read or not read? And we came to a resolution on that. I think it was a vote of 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. That's what we should do. And luckily I have 6 votes, and so we did it. We're doing it my way. But there's a poet named Roque Dalton, and I never heard of Roque Dalton, but he wrote a poem translated by Jack Hirschman, and there were 2 lines in that poem. And I promise you guys, if you sent me your poems, I'd read your poems. Didn't say I'd understand your poems, or Brian said you don't have to bother understanding them. But there's 2 lines, and I'm sure Cheryl may get into a little later. A quote is, quote, in part, he says, quote, "I believe the world is beautiful, and that poetry, like bread, is for everyone," unquote. So I picked that particular line to get off into the topic of what is poetry, okay? And then I'm going to have my comment about what is poetry at the end, and you can throw tomatoes at me if you like. Who wants to start? Let's start with, Hannah, since you were the first one being introduced, tell me, what do you believe poetry is? And by the way, as she says what she says, feel free to jump in and make any comments, whatever. Feel free to do so, but you're going to have a chance to do your, sort of like your direct examination if we were in court versus the cross-examination. Okay, so Hannah, what do you think? And there's no right or wrong answers, by the way. Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society, there are no right or wrong answers. Hannah, what's poetry?
For me, it's connection, and it's kind of like an artist uses a paintbrush. We use words and images and experience and interpretation of the experience through words, and it's it's music too. It's like lyrical, and it's interesting because our discussion, our spirited discussion, Brian said that certain song, who did we? Bob Dylan. Someone
Bob
said
who? Who was that?
Bob Dylan.
Oh yeah, I know.
Is a poet, and Brian said no, he's a songwriter, and it's interesting. I was thinking a lot about that, and I feel that poems can be musical and lyrical, and songs are songs, and the lyrics can be poetic, but it may not necessarily be poetry.
I'll bet you that there'll be some discussion about that exact topic a little later in the show. I'll bet you.
Okay.
I'll bet you there's some discussion about that. But so essentially, if you were to take your position of what is poetry, if you had 3 or 4 words to do bullet points, because you gave us some bullet points that you thought what poetry was. What would you say poetry is?
It's connection to inner self, the spirit, the spark of the spirit, that passion, and it's sharing that and creating an electric current with the reader.
Accessibility, you also said, I think, to the night.
Accessibility, yeah.
Great. We're going to come back to your perspective on what is poetry, and since you mentioned Brian, we'll let Brian tell us next, as a professor from WestConn, what you think poetry is, and any comment you want to make, Brian, are fine.
Yeah, I would say not only is there not a good answer to the question of what is poetry, I would say there is no answer to what is poetry. I believe that there's no single definition that you could come up with that would fulfill all questions about every different kinds of poetry. There's so many different ways of making poetry and so many different ways of experiencing poetry, so many different conceptions of poetry across cultures, so many different kinds of poems, so many different forms of poems, that there's not really a single answer that could encapsulate all of those different kinds of poetry.
I'm sorry, I thought you finished.
Yeah,
When you
go
write a poem, why are you writing the poem?
I have to find out when I write the poem.
That's right.
Is that so? Could you be driving to this show today and have a great idea and pull over the side of the road and say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's a poem"?
It happens all the time, or in the shower, or while I'm teaching, or while I'm watching TV. As someone said earlier, as part of natural life, poetry is thinking. There's an answer. Poetry is thinking. That's not an exclusive answer. It's one of the many things that poetry is. Poetry is a way of getting what we're thinking about and what's important to us externalized through the filter of language. Frequently that filter will kind of musicate the language. It might be lyrical, it might not be. It might be difficult to understand, it might be accessible. There's just no single way of thinking about poetry. There's just too many different variations.
Before we got on the show today, you were in the studio and we were talking, and I said one thing about poetry is I never really understand, sometimes I don't understand the poem, although to be honest, I can pick out lines and analyze certain things like I can do anything. And you said, that's your problem, Bob, you don't need to understand poetry. Right. What did that mean? What did your comment mean?
Yeah, I think there's too much focus on meaning in poetry. Primarily the effect, the emotional effect of the poem on us is more important than the meaning. I don't think there are that many different meanings. I think all poems are about the same thing, the experience of being human. On some level, every poem is about that. Do we understand all of the different permutations of the meanings of the words and the secret hidden meanings and all? I don't care about any of that. I care about the emotional impact of the poem on me as a reader, or if I'm writing a poem, the emotional impact of the poem upon you that I've written. So I think meaning is overrated. I'm more interested in effect and connection.
So Barb, when you write a poem and someone reads your poem that you wrote and gives you their analysis of the poem, how does it make you feel?
Oh my gosh, I don't want them to analyze, I want them to feel the poem. And it's interesting, I want to just riff a little bit on something that Brian said about it's a voyage of discovery as much for the poet as it is for the reader. And in fact, I forget which poet said, no surprise for the poet, no surprise for the reader. So you really, if you have an idea where you're going to go with the poem when you're writing it, you should stop because it's a journey. A little bit more on what is poetry. I like the idea of, it's anything almost that you can conceive of. I used to think that a poem was something in lines, but then we have prose poetry and all sorts of visual poetries now where things are scattered on the page. So yeah, it's about connection, it's about emotion. If you don't have an emotional response to a poem, then I think that it's not particularly a successful poem. If it leaves you wondering, that's fine, but if it leaves you with no feeling whatsoever, then it's missed its mark.
For you as a particular reader, though, it
Right.
might hit the mark for a different
For
reader.
another reader, yes.
I asked you all to send me some poems, and before I get to Cheryl, you sent me a poem called The Niagara River by Kay Ryan.
Right.
Did you want to read that short poem for us?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay, because then I'm going to do something following that up.
Oh, excellent. The Niagara River by Kay Ryan. As though the river were a floor, we position our table and chairs upon it, eat and have conversation. As it moves along, we notice, as calmly as though dining room paintings were being replaced, the changing scenes along the shore. We do know this is the Niagara River, but it is hard to remember what that means.
Is there a Niagara River?
Yes.
And when you sent me that, you sent me an email and you said, I'm forwarding the poem I'd like to read and discuss. It's very short.
51
but
words, or
that's
61
right,
words.
But not short of meaning or metaphor. What's a metaphor?
Oh, there you go. The thing that most students try to avoid. A metaphor is a comparison between two things that are totally unlike each other, and yet they have something similar that connects them. So this is definitely a metaphoric poem where it sounds like she's just talking about people eating dinner on a boat, maybe on the Niagara River, but she's talking about so much more than that. So I don't know if you want me to explore that now, but
I'm going to come back to that.
okay, good.
Because when I read it the first time I read it, I said, okay, she's talking about eating food on a river. That's not why she sent this poem. It was just about eating food in a river, whatever.
There's nothing wrong with eating food on rivers.
Well, if you don't have a boat, it is. Okay, so now Cheryl, let's talk to you. So tell me, Cheryl, last but not least, what is poetry?
I think poetry is being able to take words and connect to the human spirit in some way. Is like what makes us human is how we relate to one another. And I feel that poetry is, for me at least, the ultimate way of relating to another human being. So putting something out there creatively with words that touches upon something that we all deal with, whether it's life, death, struggles, immigration. We are all experiencing that, and we can connect on that level. And most of the poetry that I'm drawn to encapsulates that, and it does have emotion. And it is trying to bring out what differentiates us from something inanimate, or we are able to connect on this level with words and have meaning that touch people. And so last night when I do a second Wednesday of the month poetry series with a feature and an open mic, and Hannah was the feature last night. Brian will be the feature in June. People were moved. People were touched and feeling the emotion of that. And that's really what, for me, maybe differentiates poetry from just I don't know, something else.
Another genre?
Yes.
Is that the right word?
Yeah.
If I could have my director put on the screen now the Cheryl first photo. Hopefully we'll get to that. I don't know if you, that's the one. Okay, I'm showing this for a reason. See, I prepared my homework.
Okay.
You see where it says poetry workshop? That's your workshop you do.
Yeah.
And underneath it says, quote, unleash your creativity, express your magic with unique story, and connect with others through the power of words. So when I was asking the question, what is poetry, and thinking about what is poetry, I'll have to admit to you, you get the 25-cent prize because that sentence meant something to me. I'd like to have the people here today talk about that sentence in terms of, that you wrote that sentence yourself, or did you
No, the irony of that is Long story, but I'm doing this workshop.
We have an hour show.
I'm doing this workshop at Harambee, and they have a WestCon student, I believe, who is doing their social media for them. So I sent her like the outline of my, I sent her the outline, and she came up with that, like, that flyer. So those are actually her words interpreting my words.
Okay,
about what I was teaching.
Whoever wrote that,
Yes.
I'd like to have a comment about those words.
Yeah.
That to me was a very succinct comment. Doesn't mean what poetry is, but I thought it was a good comment.
Right.
Barb
I-
has her hand up.
Yeah.
By the way, is this poetry right here, the Bobby O Show? Is that right?
I think the key part of that sentence was the power of words. And as we were talking the other day in our prep, we were talking about how poetry isn't just meant for entertainment, although it can be. I mean, you can have children's poems and you can have very funny poems, you can have limericks, but it's also a tool for social change, a very powerful tool for social change. Whether it's poets who are talking from marginalized spaces, or poets from Gaza, many of whom have been killed, poets from the Ukraine, many of whom have been killed, but they're trying to change the world through words, and that's a key purpose as I see it. And Brian can speak to that too with his bullets into bells.
I think Hannah, then Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you can't see they're behind you.
I can't.
As I was driving here, I passed a monument store that sells, what are they called? Monuments
For
when you
statues,
die.
maybe?
Yeah.
Cemetery?
Cemetery monument.
no,
Oh, those come
And
up.
I was thinking, poets' poems are theirs. They're monuments. Right, they can live on through that, whether it's and the marginalized communities, and that's the voice that can speak from beyond, and it's not just a hard piece of stone.
And some people like to have poetry read at their funerals.
Absolutely.
I've already told my family that there's going to be one song played at my funeral, and Brian knows the name of that song, I bet you. Stairway to Heaven. Come on. Now, we don't know how to get that way. Brian, you had a comment about this?
Yeah, I was going to first focus on the word creativity that was in that description, but then Barb said something that kind of attached onto that, and that's the idea of changing the world. And I think that's exactly what creativity is, actually, is an attempt in some way to change the world. It might be an attempt to change the world on a personal level, with the very personal way we interact with our immediate environment. It might be an attempt to change the political realities of the world that we face. But I think that's not only an essential part of poetry, and it's an essential part, again, of being human. We are all in some way essentially creative, and poetry is one of the many ways that we have to utilize that creativity.
Why choose the genre of expressing those feelings in a poem as opposed to expressing it in a novella or in a novel? Why choose that genre to write it? That's and there's no answer to that question, but just
Oh, there's an answer for me. I didn't choose it. It chose me.
it chose you.
That's just kind of the way my brain works.
And I
Yes.
think that it's
You guys are cool. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Brian, it's interesting that you said that that's the way your brain works, because when I accepted the position, I gave a little speech at this award ceremony for students from Danbury who had written poetry and they won awards, and I had a speech prepared. And one of the things that because somebody asked me, when do I write, right? And a part of that description was it's just the way my brain works. So ever since I was young, I started writing poetry, so I could be driving, walking, sitting here, in any circumstance, my brain will think of something and it connects, and it starts with the idea while I'm simultaneously doing something else, and my brain just automatically, and those are the words that I exactly used. It's just the way my brain works. So I can be in conversation and I'm like,
Do you ever get afraid that you get this thought and you may forget it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about that. I had a 45-day trial that went for over a year and a half. And I usually walk 4 miles a day in downtown Richfield 5-6 days a week, except when it's snowing out. I had an idea about 2 miles into the walk. that for my closing argument. And I said, holy cow, I'm going to forget this. So I turned around and I started running back to my car because I didn't have my cell phone. I couldn't write it down. I didn't want to forget that amazing thought that was going to be in my closing argument. Of course, I got to my car, I forgot it. But when I got home later on, I had written it down. Any more comments before I go to my next comment that I have about poetry? Okay, you're going to have some more comments. I'm going to read to you something that I think I view as poetry. And you can hold the booing and hissing till about the 6th line. Here's one of my favorite, quote, poems, unquote. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? I'm going to skip to the end. The answer, my friend, is blown in the wind. The answer is blown in the wind. I'm sure everyone in this room knows who wrote that, okay? So Bob Dylan wrote that in a song called Blown in the Wind. Is that poetry? Cheryl, yes or no? We're going to explain in detail. I want a yes or no, no thinking. Top of your head. Is that poem, yes or no? I'm going to skip you in 2 seconds. Yes or no? Is that a poem or not? You sound like somebody from the Trump administration. They
No,
can't
I'm
answer
going to
yes or
say no.
no. Barb.
I'll say no as well.
Helen. Hannah.
No.
You know my answer.
Okay. So I'm going to say this to you. I thought I used to get 1 vote. When I was on the Board of Education in Rich, I got many times it was 1 to 8, and that convinced people. As a illiterate lawyer, and not a poet, I can't imagine how there could be rules, because you folks as poets have no rules. You have E.E. Cummings, who writes with the letters the way she writes. E.E. Cummings writes. I don't know if it's a man or a woman, E.E. Cummings, but E.E. Cummings does that. You have, the Raven. You have all these different kind of things, and some are short, some are long. And how you folks have the audacity, how you like the audacity to tell this Yale undergraduate, Duke Law School graduate from Shelton, Connecticut, Shelton High School, that that's not poem. So tell me, Barb, I want to know why this is not a poem.
Well, I have
just because he sang the music to it.
Yeah,
By the way, P.S. When I went to Yale, I never heard of Bob Dylan. And this guy down the hall from me was playing this. I said, "Who the heck is he?"
Who's that?
What did I know? Shelton Bob, right?
Well, it does use poetic elements. There's something, anaphora, which is a fancy name for repetition. How many times, how many, and then also the last 2 lines being repeated. But I'm not sure. It doesn't affect me enough to be a poem. And also, I think I know it's a song.
It's hard to hear it
So
otherwise.
It's hard to hear it otherwise.
The fact that it doesn't impact you enough. So if I read a lousy poem, it wouldn't be a poem because it didn't impact you enough? I'm being a lawyer.
Wow,
I'm not
that's
trying to pin you on the spot, but,
I mean,
but it's a fair comment.
There are lots of bad poems in the world, yes.
But
and
no
I've
bad
written
poets.
most of
But
them.
no bad poets. Not the ones who are here today. Okay, I didn't mean to put you on the
Oh,
spot,
no,
but I
that's
did.
fine. You did.
Cheryl, why is this not a poem? Does anyone want to volunteer to answer? And Brian,
I have an answer.
Yeah,
You know I have an answer,
Yeah.
but let Cheryl talk first.
Why is it not a poem?
We could start with what is a poem. But
Right,
but the way you guys, if I played back for you what you all said about poetry is, you'd say, wait a minute, this is a poem.
Well, I think that, it's somewhat also intent, I feel, that, when someone writes a song, there's an intent, why not make it a poem instead? So maybe the emphasis is on melody in a different way.
But some songs, excuse me, are written, the lyrics are first and the song is second. I don't want to ruin our whole show, not ruin, but take the whole show on this. I wanted to get this point across because I thought it was important in our discussion that to discuss. And Brian gets the last word on this.
Okay.
For a change with me. and then I want to get into some poetry you all have been involved with. So Brian, tell me why I'm wrong.
Hannah, did you want to say something about it?
I listened to Brian and I was really thinking about it deeply and like what Barb said, it's a song. And I heard when you were reading it, I heard the music. And
I didn't sing it, though.
It was the intent. You didn't have to sing it. I heard the music. So that was, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a beautiful song. And it is meaningful and it does touch me. But it's not a poem. And
Brian gets the last word.
I would say two things. First of all, there is a difference between something that is written intentionally as a song and something that's written intentionally as a poem. And that difference comes from the fact that the song is intended to be accompanied by music. So there's a different kind of spacing in the words, the way the words fall within the metrical pattern of the song that's different from the way words work in a poem. There are more spaces that are kind of filled with the musical accompaniment and the songwriting that you wouldn't have in a poem. Secondly, I don't care what you want to call poetry. If you want to call your owner's manual for your BMW poetry, go ahead. I'm not going to fight with you about it. As I said before, there are so many different kinds of poetry and so many different ways of thinking about poetry that I'm not here or anywhere to tell anybody that something is not poetry. My opinion is that that is not a poem because it's not built the way a poem is built, and it doesn't have the kind of direct effect on a listener that a poem has.
Before I transition, I'm going to say, I think you guys would agree with this comment, and that is, as writers, and you write poetry, others write novels, etc., the fact that someone is talking about his or her poem, that was written in 1962. So it's what, 50, 60 years ago, okay? And the fact that something you wrote, whatever genre you chose to do it in, is being thought of and analyzed and had discussion on the Bobby O Show is a good thing. So leaving that as the last word on that topic, I want to transition now. One thing I wanted to do that we had discussion about is to talk about two things that we're going to do today. One is going to be what you guys are doing in terms of trying to get poetry more viewed by people and having people come to listen to poetry and grow from poetry, et cetera, et cetera. And the other one's going to be to talk about some poetry. So I think the way I want to do it, since the one you want to do the most was talking about how you get poetry into the community, I'm going to accede to that and go around the horn and have you guys talk about what you are doing. And I think the thing that we'll start with is the garden in Richfield.
Oh, great.
So that would be Barb's picture of the 4 events in Richfield, the Richfield Garden, so to speak. There it is. I have great directors doing that.
And yeah, you can even zoom. That's great.
Okay, what is this?
Okay, this is our 6th year of Poetry in the Garden at Keeler Tavern Museum and History Center. It's a July summer evening, Monday evenings in July. We have poetry and music in the beautiful, incredible historic walled gardens of Keeler Tavern Museum. It's our, as I mentioned, it's our 6th year. I started the program in 2021 when we were still coming out of the pandemic. And the whole point was to be someplace where we could be out in the open. Everybody wanted to get back into live poetry and community-centered events again. So it was perfect, you know, a perfect place, a perfect time. This year we have, well, we always have had some fabulous poets, but this year we have for instance, Richard Blanco, who was the poet who read at Obama's inauguration. We also have Marilyn Nelson, an incredible poet from here in Connecticut, and Cornelius Eady, you see his picture in the upper right-hand corner, who recently read at Mom Donnie's inauguration as mayor of New York City. So great selection of poets. And again, it has, because Keeler Tavern Museum has kind of embraced it as part of their humanities programming, it has a link to history in terms of poets speaking their truths. As you can see in the subhead there, it says
Time out. Poets speaking their truths.
Yes.
What does that mean, poets speaking their truths? I thought poetry was very wide open. What does that mean?
Well, it's also, in this series at least, it's people speaking about particular marginalizations that they address through their poetry. You know, the Black America, and we have Gay America, and we have Immigrant America, and so that's pretty much the way it's being embraced by Keeler Tavern Museum and History Center.
Can anybody come to these?
Yes, and they're free. It's Monday evenings at 7 o'clock. In the event of rain or really hot weather, we move inside the beautiful garden house. Where
Keeler Garden. I mean, I walk by it every day.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
So Monday, July 6th at 7 o'clock?
Yep. 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th. Just come. You don't need to worry about pre-registering or anything. Ridgefield's a great place to spend in the afternoon.
And you were smart not to have it on Tuesday night, so
I know.
Chirps does not. The Chirp concerts don't get
The
anything.
first year I had it on the night with Chirp, which is the free concerts in Ridgefield, and it was a battle of the will.
I'm going to commit to you that I will be at one of those events.
Oh, I hope you do.
I will come.
Yes,
I will come
it's
to that, and I
incredible.
won't ask any question about what is poetry. Okay, is there anything more that you want to say about that? Just one more thing. If you were to say a sentence or two about your target, what's the goal? What's the absolute goal in that?
The goal is accessibility. These poets are all, they're not, they're intellectual poets and academic poets, yes, but their poetry is also very accessible, so people in the audience can understand what they're rebelling against, basically, and why they're writing poetry to change their world in certain ways. So does that answer your question?
Yes, and by the way, are any of these books that are shown here books that you brought today?
No.
Okay, so we'll have it from others.
Bob, can I just add one thing?
Yes, yes.
First of all, to say that's an incredible lineup of poets that Barb has put together. But also Barb runs an online poetry series that I think she should talk about as well.
What's the online series?
Oh, thank you. It's a Zoom online program through Ridgefield Library. It's called Poems from Connecticut's Four Corners. Every month, the first Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock online, we have, 5 poets, one from each corner of Connecticut and a 5th from the Central Hartford region. They're poets of all different ranges of publication history. I mean, there's people just out of their MFA programs, and there are poets who are National Book Award nominees and things like that. So it's a really nice cross-section of poets. And we're into our 3rd year now. We've hosted over 150 Connecticut poets. I mean, people are like, 150 poets from Connecticut? I still have a huge roster of poets who are waiting to
One
read.
of the negatives of COVID is that too many things are done on Zoom. I do shows that are remote. But the positive is you have people over the state. I've done shows with people from California. So there's a pro and con, but thank you.
Absolutely.
But I will commit to being one of those. In fact, the one I go to, I'm going to tell Brian and Abby, his wife, that I'm going to make them come with me. I'll even buy them dinner. There's a McDonald's right around. No, that's not true.
No,
All right, Brian, we're going to go to you next talking about, so we need the Walt Whitman. I'm just telling, that's my director.
Okay.
Brian, talk about what things you do. I know you're a professor at University of Wisconsin. Tell us about what you do to try to bring outreach. I think that's the word, outreach of poetry.
Yeah, well, I do everything that I can to support folks like my
Is this the
colleagues
right one?
here.
That's the right one, right?
That's mine, yeah. But at WestCon, we do a lot of poetry programming on campus. For example, on March 24th, we're hosting a reading of the Connecticut Poetry Circuit, which
What's
is
that?
Connecticut Poetry Circuit provides an opportunity to 4 or 5 college-age poets per year to do a poetry reading tour around the state, basically. So this year, one of our WestCon poets was selected. This is the 4th out of the past 5 years that a WestCon poet has been selected for the circuit. So they go around to different campuses around the state to do a poetry reading. So they'll be reading at WestCon on the 24th. I'm also doing a talk about poetry on April 1st that's open to the public. Folks can find out information about that at the WestCon website. The title of that talk is The Marketplace of Campo dei Fiori, or What is Poetry?
Say that again,
Just
please.
The Marketplace of Campo dei Fiori, or What is Poetry? To return to a returning question this evening.
What was that website? Can you use the website?
It's wcsu.edu.
One more
It's
time.
the WestCon website, wcsu.edu. There'll be information about that event there. But we're doing poetry events all throughout the year. And hopefully in the fall we'll be bringing Barb to offer a reading on campus, as she'll be teaching a course for us. Every Atom, which you have on the screen here, is a project that I worked on back in 2019, which was the 200th anniversary of Walt Whitman's birth. And to celebrate Whitman's 200th anniversary, we had basically an online conversation with 200 different poets, critics, songwriters, filmmakers, doctors, regular citizens, and every day for 200 days we had one person providing a little commentary on a piece of Whitman's Song of Myself.
Why Walt Whitman? When I asked that question offline, you gave me a look like, what?
Yeah, like, why not Walt Whitman?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it was because it was the 200th anniversary of his birthday, and he's worthy of celebration. He's actually a very complicated poet. He has a complicated legacy. He's an important poet for the history of American poetry. He's really the first American poet in my book. But you know, there are racist elements of some of his work, and there are other political complications of his legacy. So that was part of the conversation. It wasn't just hey, geography. We were talking about the pluses and the minuses of the Whitman legacy in the project. So that's at the website.
Do you have a favorite Walt Whitman poem?
Song of Myself, which is a 55-section long poem,
Yeah.
is by far my favorite Whitman poem. But that project is still available. It's up online at the website for North American Review, and I don't know the exact URL for that, but if one searches North American Review on Google, then they will be led to that site.
I think you wrote this. Am I correct? You wrote 200 years after Walt Whitman. You wrote the material after that?
The introduction.
Yeah, I want to read that. 200 years after Walt Whitman's birth, how do we grapple with the complexities of his legacy? The vision for these United States that Whitman offers in the many iterations of his book is both idealistic and naive, if not an obfuscation of his previous flirtation with nativist politics and outright racist commentary. Can you talk about that a little bit?
And which part?
Any of the parts you choose.
Well, as I was just saying, it's a complicated legacy. You know, early in Whitman's life, he was loosely involved with know-nothing politics. I don't really have time to go into an explanation
like today,
of what that
know-nothing
is.
politics?
It's very similar to some of our politics today, and it was a kind of a nativist, Americanist, nationalist politics. He moved away from that fairly quickly and kind of reinvented himself through the various iterations of his book, Leaves of Grass, that he published. The deathbed edition is very different from his first edition that he published in 1855. But you know, some of the poems and all the versions of that book, especially from our perspective today, seem quite racist, especially in the way that he talks about some formerly enslaved people in some of the poems. So you know, we have to look at him with that in mind when we read his
Are
work.
you saying essentially that you can't judge a person from 1842, I'm just picking a year,
No.
under today's analysis?
I'm not saying you can't judge them. I'm saying we have to judge them knowing that some of that is racist.
Okay, I understand that. And before I go to Hannah, just quickly, please, well, I shouldn't say quickly, but you wrote a book about, or poems about Sandy Hook, right?
Not exactly.
Okay, well, correct me, please.
I co-edited an anthology called Bullets into Bells, Poets and Citizens Respond to Gun Violence, which was a collection of, I think, 50 poems by well-known poets.
Is that it right there?
That's the cover, yeah. Well-known poets from across the country. The title of the book actually is taken from a poem by Martina Spada, who was mentioned earlier here this evening. And each of the poems in the book is paired with a commentary from someone who's been a survivor of gun violence, or who has lost a family member to gun violence, or who is an activist or a politician or a community leader in the fight against gun violence. So the book becomes a kind of a conversation between the poems and the commentaries about gun violence in America.
Ironically, one of my buddies from law school, Rod Dillman, wrote a book about Kent State. He was at Kent State the semester after the murders 50 years ago, and his book was called Flowers Are Better Than Bullets. Same, very similar topic. We'll come back to this stuff if we have more time. Hannah, how about you and some poetry?
So, in terms of what we're doing in Bethel?
Whatever, yeah, whatever,
Okay.
whatever you, this is
Okay.
your time to run with.
All right, so we have come out strong in terms of having just been starting this in January. There's such I think it's a sign of the times, right? A lot of people really are drawn to, not just superficial, but really wanting to connect. So, and Molten Java in Bethel is a coffee shop that has a long history of open mics.
What's up, Mike?
Open mic is where a poet or a musician or a comedian or anybody that has something they want to share can get up and share. And every Thursday night at Molten Java, they have an open mic. And it's a mixture of everything. It has poetry, it has music, comedians, somebody that just wants to talk about their day.
Is it uplifting?
Is it
is it uplifting?
Well, it's.
I'm asking you for you to attend
It's
those.
human. It's human. It's a way to connect with the human experience on all levels. So, as poet laureate, what I wanted to do was just have a poetry open mic. So every first Tuesday of the month, we have an open mic with a featured poet, and so we had on April 7th, our featured poet is going to be Irene Sherlock from Southbury, who's a published poet and a therapist, and really looking forward to hearing her. And then that's followed by an open mic that anybody can get up and share. And it's storytelling too, so it doesn't have to be in the framework of poetry, but a story can be as well. May 5th, we have Michael Gary, who's the lead of the Bethel Connecticut Poetry Society chapter that meets every third Saturday. It was second, but now it's third, at the Bethel Public Library, and anybody can attend that, and it's a workshop. So you bring a poem, you pass out copies of your poem to everybody reads it and writes comments, and then shares, and it's really helpful. So he's going to be...
Helpful in what way?
It's helpful to test out a poem that you're writing, get reactions. You could take what you like and leave the rest. You can, I have found it very helpful in when I'm writing to, if I leave that out, or if I add this, or move this around, and everybody has an opinion, and it's
There's
great.
a joke about that, right? Everyone has an opinion.
It could be grain of salt. It could be, wow, that is just great to incorporate into the poem. So Michael Gary is going to be the featured poet on May 5th, followed by an open mic. And June 2nd, we have Cheryl as the featured poet. She was supposed to be this month, but we had an ice storm. So
You let a little ice storm interfere with this great poetry? Come on.
well, we wanted people to attend. I didn't want to be. We'd have to hire a lawyer if anyone broke.
I was just going to watch Duke play Clements in Durham, North Carolina on the Monday of the blizzard. And I had to cancel the trip. So I understand that sometimes the weather gets in the way.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to you and ask you for a poem if you'd like to read a poem or talk about a poem. But I want to get to Cheryl. Have you finished your activities?
Yeah, and every third Tuesday we have a writing workshop at the studio. So we have featured facilitators, and this month on March 17th is St. Patrick's Day, and we have Rick McGee, who's Irish. He was the poet laureate in Bethel prior to me. And he's going to run the workshop. And April 21st is Cheryl. May is to be determined. And June 15th, we have Katie Schneider from Norwalk.
Terrific. By the way, on March 17th, I'm Irish also. It's Bobby Potts.
I know. I know you're Irish.
Last but not least, Cheryl.
Hi. And if we could have my
Yes.
things back
please?
on.
Sure. Can we have the Cheryl items back on? Not the one we saw. Yeah, this is what you want.
So this Saturday, I am one of the featured poets for Phenomenal Women Poetry Reading, sponsored by the Woodbury Poet Laureate at the Woodbury Public Library, 11:30 a.m. Everyone is welcome. And I'll be reading some poems really focused on women, poems that I've written, that feature women predominantly. But also the other thing that I do is every second Wednesday of the month, I have a feature. So Hannah read last night, April 8th, we have Ed Ditzik, who is a poet and co-publisher of Oronog Mountain Publishing, right here in Southbury. May 13th, I have Shermont Little from New Haven, and on June 10th we have none other than Brian Clements. These are all held at the Booksmith Shop.
Wait, time out. You have Brian Clements on June 10th.
Yes.
Where is that going to be? I'm sorry.
These are all at the Booksmith Shop, which is in Danbury, at the Summit, which is 100 Reserve Road. So it's roughly runs from 6 to 8. We have a feature, and then we have an open mic, and people from the community attend. So it's an opportunity to hear poetry. The other,
Before you leave that,
yes.
you have committed to go to one of Barb's things.
Yes.
Since Barb's are in July, because I can't have more than one poetry
Yes.
session.
Yeah.
I'm going to commit to the June 10th activity. I'm sure his wife makes some kugel for her. She makes great kugel. And potato latkes too. So it's June 10th, 6 p.m.
Yep.
Okay, very good. I'll
At the Booksmith shop.
Okay, thank you. Brian will remind me about that, please, at least 5 times.
And then actually I'm doing workshops in April at the high school in Danbury. But one of the major things that I'm doing, which includes music, poetry, education, it's a benefit for Greater Danbury Unites for Immigrants. And so I have 3 featured poets. One of them is myself, Dan Silva Souza, who is a WestCon student, and Brianna Benscombe, and I'm blanking on her last name, full last name.
Beto.
Yes, Beto. She will also be a poet. She's a graduate from the MFA program.
MFA stands for?
The Masters in Fine Arts
And who
at
runs that program?
WestCon.
And who runs that program?
This gentleman right here.
I used to run
so,
that program. My
used to
daughter's
run it. Okay.
Anthony Derry is
By
Yes,
the way,
okay.
I did not get paid for
No,
that plug.
no. So
Although I'm getting extra paid kugel next
right,
year.
right. In that event, if anyone wants to see where to find these, if you go on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, look at Danbury Poet Laureate, and I have a page where I post all this. But I also have a page on Instagram, which is also Danbury Poet Laureate. And anything related to poetry that I'm aware of or that I'm supporting or I'm involved in will be on that page.
You 4 are amazing, and I didn't realize that so much is being done on poetry, and that's my fault, not yours. But I hope that after this show, there'll be a link provided to you, and you can put it on your various websites so people can understand and see what's going on. I'm going to put you on the spot, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned phenomenal women, and I can't believe any woman's not phenomenal, so I don't know how to use that topic, right? But there's a poem you sent to me called "Dignified Silence, Woman Art."
Yeah.
Is that a poem? Is it a poem that you wrote, or?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to read it to us? I have a copy of it.
Sure.
If you need it.
I need a copy.
I knew you were going to need a copy.
So this is an ekphrastic poem.
What kind of poem?
I will. It's an ekphrastic poem.
Can you spell that word, please?
Yes, EKPHRASTIC.
Okay, thank
So
you. I'll keep that
like,
for words. I'll keep that for words in French.
Okay, keep that. So what that essentially means, it's a poem that was written based on art, and so as it so happens, both Hannah and Brian, myself, participated in an event that I organized, which included art and poetry. So essentially, the poets got a slide of an art and decided which piece to write a poem about.
So why don't you
So
read it? We
it's
only have 2 minutes
yes.
left.
Okay. Sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to get your poem
Yes. Dignified silence.
in.
Women.
Don't read it fast. Read it normal speed.
Okay. Dignified silence. Women's art. If speech is silver, silence is golden. Arabic origin, author unknown. Not a requiem, hush of lost words or unspoken taboo. Not the slip into sullen silence, not censorship or mutism. A woman's vision, not spectacle, superficial illustration, nor fragile gilding appliques to cheapen image. A meditation, contemplation, search into soul's solace, an epistle, power in reflection, louder than shouting, but raise your voice, grace through strength to create beyond black or white into grays, scarlet echoes to anguish and allure. We invent in silence, bold brush or pen across canvas page, to convey beyond paint, ink, or product. Quiet intentions connect painting, and poem. Amplify art, louder than shouting, but raise your voice. So that phrase,
Okay,
raise your voice.
Okay, we run out of time, and I'm going to read the poem, but I want to just tell one other thing. You guys are awesome. You're going to come back at some point in time, I hope. And I want to tell you, we had one more guest in the green room, but Bob Dylan, we ran out of time, Bob. Sorry.
Sorry, Bob.
So on that note, he isn't really.
You can be on the songwriting show.
That's right, okay. This has been Bob Potzer on The Bobby O Show, and a phenomenal show, and very uplifting because we started the show with some bad news today about our society, but hopefully tonight Duke will win the basketball game. This has been Bob Potzer. Thank you very much on The Bobby O Show.